What is the Facebook, your Facebook profile? Is it Texas Historical Commission?
It's Friends of the THC.
Okay.
And I'm going to start admitting people in. All right.
To the incredible individuals who work in our school every day.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I'm going to give people another 30 seconds or so to join the meeting. There are people in the waiting room.
Morning of January.
Yep, she got her news on.
Capitol spells out how former President Trump repeatedly pushed.
I would also ask for those of you that are on the call already to please mute your microphones so that you'll be able to hear the presenter as well. And I'll go over the housekeeping stuff again in a minute.
There's a little thing on the top left.
All right, while everyone is joining, I wanted to welcome you all. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We are thrilled to have you be part of our second episode, if you will, of our new virtual event series, Histories of the Soil. This series focuses on the land heritage in Texas and histories associated with that. Today's presentation, again, we'll focus on histories of the soil, exploring the history of land across Texas and that of people who were and are an integral part of the stories this land holds, including Indigenous American lands and trails, freedom colonies, iconic Texas ranches, and more. As always, our hope is that through these events, you continue to get to know us, the Friends of the Texas Historical Commission, a little bit more, and you get to learn about our mission to support the Texas Historical Commission in its preservation efforts across the state. Many of you have chosen to support us through these events and otherwise, for which we are very, very, very grateful. Thank you so much. And we hope that you all will continue to join us and enjoy the content that we share. I also wanted to welcome any of our board members and advisors, commissioners that might be on today for this session. Thank you all for taking time to join us. And I wanted to introduce my colleagues, Katie Cooperbaum, who is the brains behind these events. She is the one who reaches out to our presenters and sets up these events and brings this whole thing together every time. Yega Ramazani, who's our behind the scenes person who basically keeps us all doing what we need to do. And Hope Baron, who is our social media expert, who has been reaching out to you via Facebook at THC Friends and on Instagram and Twitter at friends_THC. So if you're on social media and you're not following us on these platforms, please do so. Also, please note that we are broadcasting live on Facebook right now, and we will share the link with you all after the event is over in the next day or so, so that you can share it with your friends who might want to hear the presentation as well. Before we get started, I also wanted to let you know that our next virtual event of our regular series is titled The Dichotomy of Purple Hull Peas. The presenter is Dr. Clarence Bunch of Prairie View A&M University. This event is scheduled for June 22nd at 6 p.m. Following that, in July, on July 21st, at 6 p.m., we will have an event focusing on preserving historic cemeteries. That event will be presented by Jenny McWilliams and Carlin Hammonds, who are THC staff members, part of the THC's Cemetery Preservation Program. Registration for these events, both of these events, is open at www.thcfriends.org. A few housekeeping items before I introduce today's event and our presenters. We would appreciate, like I mentioned, if you could keep your microphones on mute. Feel free to keep your cameras on. Our presenters will have a presentation, so that is going to take over your screen for a little bit. But if you could keep your mics off and cameras on, that would be fantastic. If you have to walk away and do other stuff, please feel free to do that. I would also recommend that you switch your viewing option to speaker view so you can get a better view of the presentation and of the presenters. We will start with the presentation, and we'll have a Q&A at the end of it. You're welcome to drop your questions in the chat box, and we will throw them out to the presenters at the end. Or you can put your name in the chat box if you'd like for us to call on you so you can ask your own question. We're happy for you to do that. So either way. And again, as I mentioned, we're broadcasting this event through Facebook Live. It is now my privilege to introduce our presenters for today. As you know, the Friends of the THC's motto is preserving the real places and real stories of Texas. So storytelling is key and core to the work that we do and to the work of historic preservation. And our presenters today are true storytellers, a filmmaker and an archivist and curator and a producer. Both of them enjoy sharing stories from Texas history in their own unique ways. Funmi Ogunro is a Nigerian-American, Lone Star Emmy-nominated film director and editor based in Los Angeles, California, and Austin, Texas. We were just talking about this before you all came on board, and we've decided we're going to claim Funmi as an Austinite. Most recently, Funmi was part of the editorial team for Fat Tuesdays, an Amazon original series. Funmi has over 10 years of experience in non-scripted and scripted film and television, collaborating with major companies such as Amazon, PBS, YouTube, Pop Sugar, Quibi, and Bunim Murray. She was also awarded a National Educational Telecommunications Association, NETA, award for her work on the national TV series American Graduate, funded by the Corporation of Public Broadcasting and distributed on PBS. Funmi is currently developing a feature-length documentary about the history of Black freedom communities in Austin, Texas. Rachel E. Winston is an archivist and curator based out of Austin, Texas. In her work, Rachel explores the documentation and representation of the Black diaspora within cultural institutions, engages in public history projects, and promotes archival activism. Rachel is an alumna of Davidson College, the Coro Fellows Program in Public Affairs, and the University of Texas at Austin. She currently works as the Black Diaspora Archivist at the University of Texas at Austin. Again, please make sure you are viewing in speaker view so that you can see the presentation well. And with that, Funmi, Rachel, thank you both so much for taking time to be with us today and for sharing your expertise, your experience, your stories, and your knowledge with us. Thank you so much, and it is all yours.
Hello, and thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. It was nice listening to our bios. So my name is Funmi, and I am a native Austinite, and I'm so excited to share some stories with you, or particularly the stories of Austin freedom communities. And so I want to share my screen because we have a very colorful presentation and some videos that we want to share with you all. So give me one moment. Okay, so I want to just briefly mention Artist Cool. That is the production company that I produce films under. And so you can visit our website, artistcool.co, to learn more about that. This is our image that we showcase often. It represents our documentary, Austin Black Freedom Communities, and I'm going to get into that in a little bit. But first, I want to, yeah, we're gonna start off with the video, and then we're gonna get into it a little bit more. Uh-oh. Wait a second.
Freedom communities or freedmen's communities were established by formerly enslaved blacks after the Civil War ended in 1865, not only in the city of Austin, but around the city of Austin and even in rural Travis County.
Did you know a couple blocks away from South Congress lived a freedom community named Southside, also known as Brackenridge? There were over 13 freedom communities throughout Austin and Travis County. Black people built these communities from scratch, building homes, grocery stores, churches, and schools.
It was a place where African Americans did live back in the day following emancipation. The 1870s it began, and it was a place where folks had a community. They had everything they needed except utilities, paved streets, water, transportation. They had everything except the kinds of things that you'd associate with urban life.
Okay, so before we dissect that and really get into the nitty gritty of Austin Black Freedom Communities, I just want to tell you a little bit more about myself and Rachel. So I'm a film producer and director, born and raised in Austin, Texas. And I currently live in LA, but I go back and forth between Austin and LA. And before coming out to LA, I worked at PBS for several years and produced documentaries and short format and long format documentaries. And so this is the current project I'm working on now. And then Rachel, I would love for you to introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you, Fumi, and good evening, everyone. I did see some familiar names in the crowd. So hey, Lisa and everybody else, good to be with you. My name is Rachel Winston. I am an archivist and curator based out of here, Austin, Texas. I have moved around a lot as a child, including a brief stint in the 90s in Central Texas. So I have come to see Austin as my adopted home. And this project is very close to my heart. Fumi and I have been working together and with some of our colleagues and friends, really trying to learn more about Austin Black freedom communities and how we can tell these stories and best tell these stories. So we're really excited to be working on this project and to talk about it with you all this evening.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm gonna share my screen again. Okay, so this is just a question you can ask yourself. When you think of Austin, what do you think about? And I ask that question because a lot of people are moving to Austin. Austin's one of the fastest growing cities in the US. And I meet a lot of new people that come to Austin, and when they tell me what they like about Austin, many times they mention some of the popular attractions, such as lakes, hiking. A lot of people, young people, come during South by Southwest and then they want to move here after South by Southwest, or they come for ACL. UT, you know, Tech City, we're the tech city of the South. Elon Musk is here. Dell, Google, Apple, like all the companies. Some people really love the food here in Austin. I personally love Gary Clark Jr., amazing musician. And so I wanted to start off with that because oftentimes when people think of Austin, they don't necessarily think of Black people. And, you know, according to the US Census Bureau, the population of Black people in Austin is 7%, around 7%, which is a stark difference from back in the day. And at one point in time in the mid 19th century, the population of Black people, according to the census, was over 35%. And so that is what really piqued my interest when I found that out a few years ago. And so just to give you a little bit more background on why this is so interesting to me, I grew up in South Austin, but both my parents grew up in East Austin. And during that time, that was in the 90s, I would see a lot of Black people in East Austin. It was just, that was known as the Black area of Austin. And I didn't question it. I never thought like, I wonder why most of the Black people live on the East Side. That just never really crossed my mind. And then I worked on a documentary with Rachel. Rachel was the producer and I was the cinematographer and editor. And we created a documentary called Reflections on the Legacy. And in that documentary, we interviewed elders, Black elders in the community, and they spoke about growing up in East Austin and the richness of the community and how they had to sustain themselves. And it was really a unified, close-knit community. And that really piqued my interest. And so while doing that project, I learned more about Black history in Austin. And I learned about Austin Black freedom communities, which brings us to the topic at hand. So the trailer you just watched is about Austin Black history. So let me explain what a freedom community is. A Black freedom community is a community where Black people live, obviously, but these communities came about after the Civil War ended in 1865. So formerly enslaved Black people had to create communities and they had to figure out where to live. And so they built communities from the ground up all over Austin and outside of Austin. And so that was really interesting to me because growing up, like I said, I saw that all the Black people lived in East Austin. And so learning that back in the 19th century, Black people lived all over Austin and we were once at 35% in population was very astonishing to me. And so this film is going to dive into the history and we're interviewing descendants of people who lived in freedom communities. We're interviewing historians, and we really want to paint a picture of what Black life looked like in the 19th century. In 1 second. And so Michael Emery is a producer at Austin PBS, and he was my mentor as I was learning how to do film and edit. And he shared a story with me about Mahala Murkison. And she is rumored to be the first Black person known to historians to live in Austin. And this was in 1839. And so we have this picture, and this picture just, her story and this picture really just resonates with me, and I find it to be fascinating. Now, we don't know exactly if she was like the very, very first Black person, but on record, that's what we have. And so we want to dig into this a little bit more as well. And then Rachel, you can take over from here, and then I'll switch back.
Great, thanks, Fumi. So as Fumi was just talking about, in 1865, after the war, you had Black folks, African Americans, around Austin, the city center, the urban center, and further out in more rural parts of Central Texas. And with emancipation, with the end of the Civil War, after Juneteenth, people did gravitate towards urban centers for resources, to try to locate loved ones, to try to rebuild their lives. And so when we see freedom communities start to establish themselves, they're in the general area, sometimes in general proximity to an urban center, but often a little further removed. And that was for self-preservation, for security, really trying to create a close-knit environment that was free from threats of violence and harm and other things that you might expect at this time. So one thing that I always like to talk about when we are thinking about this period of time is the Freedmen's Bureau. Its official name is the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands. This agency, this was a federal agency that was established in 1865, and it was set up to be temporary. So we see it shuts down in 1872. So from 1865 to 1872, the Freedmen's Bureau is operating in 11 districts across the US, including here in Texas. And so it, in a lot of ways, functioned as what we would call a social service agency today. So providing food, clothing, medical assistance, legal support, helping people locate family members, support specifically for African-American soldiers and sailors after the Civil War, and also looking to help settle people on abandoned and confiscated lands. So here in Texas, the Freedmen's Bureau was established like the rest of the country in 1865, and it ran here until July of 1870. And there were 5 different commissioners over that 15-year period, or excuse me, no, 5-year period. By May of 1866, there were 30 counties in Texas that had local offices, local Freedmen's Bureau offices that were run by sub-assistants. And so these people, the sub-assistants at the Freedmen's Bureau, were the folks who were really on the ground providing aid and support for those people coming to get support or help or guidance in moving forward and really setting up their lives after the war. And so records from the Freedmen's Bureau are available through the National Archives. The National Archives several years ago really invested in these records, making most of them available online freely, widely. So I encourage everyone to spend some time with those because they are really incredible in the stories that are captured and help us get a sense of what was going on at this time and how people might have been engaging with this agency. And so as we think a little more specifically about freedom communities, while every person in every freedom community may not have interacted with the Freedmen's Bureau, it's likely that a lot of them did. And so we just want to be mindful of that context as we think about the environment and the social political landscape of Texas at this time. So,
Okay.
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Well, we already answered this question. What is a freedom community? In that trailer you watched earlier is a teaser from our film to just summarize what a freedom community is. So I wanted to share some pictures. So I'm so grateful that we have this. It's from the Austin History Center of Austin Public Library. And this is a picture of students at Brackenridge Elementary, which is a part of the Southside Freedom Community. And that community is right by South Congress. And so as a child, I'd be walking around South Congress like la 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 la, just looking at all the shops and getting food and stuff. But I never knew that right down the street there, Black people lived there. Because remember, I told you I was thinking all Black people lived on the east side when I was younger. I mean, I know Black people lived throughout the city, but a big concentration of Black people are on the east side. And so through our research, we're learning that no, there were large concentrations of Black people throughout Austin and Travis County. So this is just a wonderful photo, and I'm so grateful we have it. This is a photo of students at Blackshear. This was a school on the east side in Austin. This was taken in the mid 1920s. So through our research, we're discovering that there were over 13 freedom communities and enclaves in Austin and surrounding areas. Here's just a few of them: Robertson Hill, Pleasant Hill, Masontown, Gregorytown. Those were all nestled in East Austin, between like 11th and 12th Street through about 4th Street. All these communities were right on top of each other. More common ones are Wheatville and Clarksville, which are across the highway on the west side. South Side community, which we spoke about just in the trailer, that's over by South Congress. Red River Street community, Barton Springs, Goodrich Street, Brudette Prairie, Kinchinville is in South Austin. There's plenty more, but we're just kind of adding a condensed list right here. There's another one that's pretty popular, Pilot Knob, which is it's near the airport, but that was a community as well. And one of the family members that's tied to a prominent freedom, a gentleman who's tied to a prominent member of Austin society. He still lives on the farm, his family's farm that goes back many, many years in Pilot Knob. So I wanted to mention really quickly, let me check the time. Okay, yeah, I wanted to mention Shoal Creek. So Shoal Creek runs through Pease Park, and Pease Park is named.
I forgot it.
And Pease Park is named after Governor Pease, who was governor of Texas in the mid 19th century. He also had a plantation and enslaved Black people. And so after 1865 and formerly enslaved Black people were now free, they built freedom communities near Pease Park. And through our research, we found that there was a lot of Black life and Black activities along Shoal Creek. And so Shoal Creek is tied to the freedom communities Clarksville and Wheatville. And so I have a clip here of Tara Dudley. She's a professor, Dr. Tara Dudley. She's a professor at UT, and she speaks about Black life along Shoal Creek. We filmed this back in March as a part of our ongoing documentation for our documentary.
Help us to receive the love that each other has for each other. Help us to see the God in each other.
I think it appropriate that we have poured libations and created a blessing of this space upon a rock, a stone, as I study the built environment, architecture, the builders, the African-American men and women labored in this area and just across Shoal Creek. But they used the materials of the creek, the soil, the water, to create the bricks. It became the foundation for Austin, the foundation for generations of families. People were enslaved by the Peases in this area, including the park where we are now standing, and they migrated. We not only have the communities we know about in East Austin, or what became East Austin, but a sizable community that developed here just across these waters that established that community. Among them were Jacob Fontaine and his family, and they had associations with the Peases. His wife was a cook for the Pease family. The landowners, including a Judge Thomas, Samuel Haney, and others, also began to parcel off property and sell it to enslaved persons, or formerly enslaved persons, freedmen, not only from possibly the Pease plantation, but other farms, farmsteads, plantations in and around Austin. And in the 1870 census, many of the Black men who were engaged in the building trades as carpenters, as stonemasons, brick masons, to a certain extent, individuals like plasterers, blacksmiths, anybody who would have in some way, shape, or form had their hands on constructing buildings and infrastructure here in Austin. Most of those men by the 1870 census were living in Wheatville.
Help us to receive the love that each other has. Help us to receive.
Yeah, so I just love that clip because Dr. Tara Dudley summarizes early Black life in Austin. And so as she mentioned, the jobs that many people had back in the day were, gardeners, soap makers, blacksmiths, domestic servants, barbers, house painters, tailors, and teachers. And so there's that. And I spoke about this before, that the population of Black people in Austin was over 35%, and land ownership was high among the Black community as well. This is just, we just wanted to include some of the food that was common during that time. And Black people had to farm, and so they grew their own food, and typically they grew beans, corn, black-eyed peas, cabbage, okra, and tomatoes, and they had cows and chickens, wild animals that are native to Austin that we see all the time now, deer, raccoons, and all of that. Okay. And so I just want to highlight Thomas Kinchin. He was the founder of Kitchenville, which is in South Austin. It was bordered by, let me make sure I'm saying that right, Paisano Trail on the north, Davis Lane on the south, Brody Lane on the west, and Longview Road on the east. And this was exciting to me, hearing about Kitchenville, because I spent a lot of time in East Austin because my parents both worked in East Austin, but we lived in South Austin. So I would pass Brody Lane all the time. And it's just, I just didn't know this history until an adult. And we want that to change so that this history is more common. This is Albert Shaw. He was a blacksmith. He was born in the Robertson Hill Freedom Community, 11th Street, and he opened up his own shop.
And Fumi, I just wanted to jump in here quickly to just mention to those that are listening, Robertson Hill, this location that Fumi just identified, is where the French Legation State Historic Site sits. And the Robertson family lived at that, and they owned the French Legation building for a period of time and lived there for a little while. And I know we have people from the French Legation State Historic Site on the Zoom call. So if anyone from that group wants to jump in and make sure I'm saying the right thing, please do.
Thank you. And thank you for that tidbit. that was a gem. And so we talked about Robert Stanley in the trailer, but he lived in the South Side Freedom Community, and his house, it's been renovated, but his house is still standing. And last I heard, it was being used as an Airbnb. So a gentleman bought it from the family, I believe. And I'm not sure if it's still operating as such. This was a couple years ago. But yeah, Robert Stanley was a stonemason and laborer and built his house. And right down the street, his wife had a grocery store. And that building is still standing, and it's called, it's called
The Herb Bar.
Say that again?
The Herb Bar.
The Herb Bar, yeah. So that's, I thought that was fascinating because I didn't know. And so on our Instagram page, Artist School Instagram page, I'm gonna click it really quick. You can see, you can learn more about, you can go through our different photos. We have a lot of archival photos that we found at the Carver Museum and the Austin History Center. And so you can spend some time and kind of just click on people and learn more about them. And we have like a caption or description. Just for example, this is Nancy Coleman Thomas. She was born a slave on August 1st, 1860. And she was a member of the Ebenezer Baptist Church. So we just have a lot of different photos, really fascinating photos. And you can just go through here and look through some of them. In our documentary, we'll have even more photos. And then Rachel, I'll let you take it.
Sure. Yeah, that was really great. I never get tired of thinking about these people and this history. So as we focus on freedom communities as just citizens of Austin, as researchers, and then as filmmakers, I think it's also important that we keep in mind the legacy. So when we're talking about freedom communities and the actual communities that develop in them, the people, the enterprise, the industries, the technical skill that comes out of these communities.
Sue Bird confirmed today that she's retiring after this.
Second. Okay, I think you're good.
Okay, there we go. We also have to think about their legacies and the impact, right, that they had on our city. So we fast forward in time, we're spending a lot of time in the late 19th century, but moving forward to 1928, you still have pockets, enclaves, communities of African Americans across the Central Texas region. And in 1928, when the city of Austin adopted the city plan, that really was in an effort to address what they call the Negro problem. And so pulling all of those communities away from the land, land was discussed earlier and the importance of being rooted in land. So pulling people from these communities where they lived successfully, thriving for decades, and relocating Black folks across East Avenue to the east side of Austin. And in that also denying them public services, water, sanitation, those kinds of things. So folks are then folks settle, create these tight-knit communities, and then are uprooted with the 1928 plan to East Austin. And without resources there too, kind of develop a new sort of community on the east side. And I also want to mention we talk about the 28 plan, the 1928 city plan a lot, but the 1929 city plan also had an impact on how African Americans lived and moved through the city, because with the 1929 plan, undesirable industries were then encouraged to be on the east side. So landfills, power plants, the Holly Street power plant being one of them, then were relocated. So first people and then undesirable industries. And out of that, still strong communities, vibrant communities, incredible people came into our city and made a real impact. So as we were talking about building community for Black people who were relocated to the East Side, they created what was known as the Negro District. Absolutely thriving restaurants, boarding houses, businesses, pharmacies, you name it, you could find it in the Negro District on the East Side. And it's been so enlightening talking to elders who grew up in East Austin, and they say time and time again that everything that they needed was right there. So folks pushed away originally, this is the legacy, right, of folks pulled from their geographic homes, their freedom communities, creating something special on the East Side that we're now working hard to preserve.
Yes, thank you, Rachel. Yeah, and so that ties back to what I was saying about not growing up, but spending a lot of time in East Austin as a child. I spent a lot of time on East 11th Street because my mom's nonprofit worked out of the building that is now Hillside Pharmacy. And she would do children's programming after school. So I was always on 11th Street and doing art, like participating in plays and writing poems. And it's very interesting to me because I didn't know that that area that I was in was such a thriving area for Black people back in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s when the Negro District was made. And so, you know, like Rachel said, after the 1928 plan and Black people were displaced and pushed into East Austin, they then had to create this community, and it was a beautiful community, and everybody helped each other out. And there are Black grocery stores and restaurants and Black teachers and Black churches, and everybody knew each other. And when we worked on that documentary, Reflections on the Legacy, it was a short film we did, and we interviewed the different elders. They spoke about that, and it was really beautiful. And so I didn't know all of that history when I was younger, but I felt it being a young child on 11th Street. I felt that energy there. I just didn't know it yet. And so as an adult, going back and hearing about the Negro District, and then learning later on about the freedom communities before the development of the Negro District, it's all very fascinating to me. And that's why we want to put this in documentary form to share with others. And so people ask, are there any freedom communities still active? Well, we're holding on to their legacy, and there's historical markers and historical homes that represent the freedom communities. And so we see that in Clarksville, and we see that in other areas too. But unfortunately, a lot of the Black people that were from these communities and their children have since been displaced. There's still some families that are holding on. Like there's some families in Clarksville still, a couple of families. And but I also want to mention St. John Colony, which is a prominent community in Caldwell County in Lockhart. And they have such a huge there's so many families that are that go back generations that are still in Lockhart and representative of the St. John Freedom Colony. And they're actually having their 150th Juneteenth celebration this Saturday. And we're going out there and we're going to be filming one of the families in the Carters. So we're going to be filming them and interviewing the families and documenting their Juneteenth celebration. So we're really excited for that. And our hope for this film is really to educate Austin natives and newcomers, all the new people coming to Austin, so that when they think of Austin, it's not just South by Southwest, which is amazing, but they also think about the contributions that Black people have made to the city of Austin and surrounding areas. So right now, we're currently in production. We're filming now. You can learn more about our documentary at artistcool.co, and you can donate to the film on GoFundMe if you'd like. I'll drop that in the chat, the link to our website and the link to our GoFundMe. I'll drop that in the chat in a few moments. So thank you again for participating, and I know we're now going to open it up for Q&As and comments.
Thank you, Fumi. And before we do that, I just want to also shout out our colleagues and friends at the Texas Freedom Colonies Project, Dr. Andrea Roberts and her team, who are doing such amazing work in recovering, identifying these communities from across the state, connecting with descendants, and really trying to recover this history. So a lot of the information that we share with amongst ourselves in this documentary, we do because of the incredible groundbreaking work that they're doing.
Thank you, Fumi, and thank you, Rachel, for your presentation. Really appreciate it. And I second what you just said, Rachel. Dr. Andrea Roberts has been a partner with the THC. I know the THC has funded projects, the Texas Freedom Colonies project that she's working on. And she's presented at our Real Places conference in the past as well about the subject, which has been really fascinating. And Fumi, to your point, when you talked about the fact that there aren't necessarily any active freedom colonies here in Austin, and you mentioned the one in Caldwell County. I also wanted to throw out another name. Shankleville is in Newton County, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a freedom community, freedom colony that the family members, descendants of Jim and Winnie Shankle, have actively preserved, and they have family get-togethers. In fact, there's one scheduled for this Saturday in Shankleville, and so their families all come together to celebrate the work and the lives of the people that established these colonies. And so there's a lot of history there. There are a lot of stories, and we really truly appreciate you all documenting those and sharing them with the rest of us. So I wanted to open it up for any questions. If anyone has questions, please just jump in if you'd like, unmute yourself and ask the question, or you can drop it in the chat box. In the meantime, I did want to mention that our colleagues from the French Legation State Historic Site did drop in a little tidbit in the chat box saying that Robertson Hill, Pleasant Hill, Gregorytown, and Masontown are all freedom communities that grew up on land that once belonged to the Robertson family, who lived at the French Legation. And they've invited everyone to stop by the legation and learn more about the site and about the connection of the site to the growth of East Austin's African American community. So please do go by. It's a beautiful, beautiful site if you haven't visited it already. Any questions? Fumi has also dropped the link to the website and the GoFundMe in the chat box if y'all are interested in that.
I don't have a question, but I wanted to say hello to Fumi and Rachel. This is Lisa Stafford from Prairie View A&M University. Hey, Fumi. But I also wanted to mention another freedom colony, and they had a celebration just yesterday, a homecoming celebration for Juneteenth, and it's right here incorporated within the city of Prairie View, and it's the Wyatt Chapel community. That's a freedom colony that was established in 1865. We celebrated yesterday with the descendants, the Wyatt Chapel community descendants And many of them had not been to the area where the cemetery, where their ancestors were buried for over 50 years before we had the celebration yesterday, because it has been an area that has not been kept up, but it's, you know, that's changing. And we had this libation ceremony yesterday and a big celebration for the Wyatt Chapel community. So I can certainly share with Rachel and Fumi more about that, because that's a community that has been overlooked. And those descendants are still living in that community and thriving. So.
Thank you, Lisa. Yes, let's definitely talk. Let's definitely follow up on that.
Sure.
Yes, thank you, Lisa, for sharing that. I really appreciate that. How do you spell the name? You said the Wyatt Chapel?
Wyatt is W.
Oh, Wyatt. Okay.
H-A-T-T.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
And I
so
just want to say congratulations to both of you.
Thank you.
Documentary.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Lisa. We have a couple of questions in the chat box. One is from Carol Peters, and she asks, did the Robertsons sell their home to the French legation, or how did that change from a family home to a legation? It was actually the other way around, but if someone from the French legation state historic site, Kyle, if you're on, if you'd like to jump in and answer that question, I would appreciate it. I will probably mess it up.
Yes, I'm here. Hello, my name is Kyle Walker. I'm the outreach coordinator here at the French Legation. So just to shed some light on the timeline to help everyone out, the French Legation was built first as the private residence of the French diplomat from France to the Republic of Texas, about a year after Austin was founded as the new capital of the Republic. Now, eventually that diplomat never lived there. The home changed hands many times, and in 1848, it was purchased by Dr. Joseph Robertson, one of the first medically trained professionals in Austin. While he purchased the 21 acres that the legation house sits on from different entities, he also owned much of the land in what's now East Austin between 11th and 12th Street, the land that Houston Tillotson University now sits on, and much of the land that's down there along East 5th, 6th, and 7th. So Pleasant Hill Freedom Colony sprang up on the north half of the original French Legation property. Robertson Hill sprang up between 11th and 12th Street on land that used to belong to the Robertsons. Gregorytown to the east sprang up on the easternmost land that belonged to the Robertsons, and Masontown sprung up to the south on the land the Robertsons owned on what's now East 5th, 6th, and 7th Street.
Awesome. Thank you, Kyle. Appreciate it. And I will say, if you visit the French Legation and have Kyle give you a tour, he is an absolute wealth of information about the history of the area. So please do go visit that site if you're here in Austin. Ralph Young, thank you so much for dropping your comment into the chat box. We are absolutely happy to provide these events, and welcome to Texas, by the way. And I'm not sure where in Texas you are, but
Missouri City, Texas.
Okay, all right. Well, welcome to Texas, and so thankful that you're joining these events to learn more about the history of the state. I really appreciate it. Any other questions? So I had a question for you both. Beyond the history of freedom colonies, and well, first question, I'm assuming, having worked with Dr. Roberts, you all have looked at sort of her larger work across the state.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other active freedom colonies that you know of, other than the few that we just spoke about, or the couple that we just spoke about? And would the Texas Freedom Colonies Project be the definitive place to go for people that want to learn more about the freedom communities across Austin and across Texas? Santiago is asking in the chat box as well.
Yeah, so Dr. Roberts' project, the Texas Freedom Colonies Project, they've identified over 500 communities across the state, which is incredible, and that number continues to grow. So when we set out to start to really develop this documentary, we knew we couldn't cover 500 communities in a single documentary. And so getting back to Fumi's point, we really wanted to hone in on Austin for this specific project to help balance the narrative. Austin is way more than South by Southwest. It's way more than the University of Texas. And while you may not see as many Black people here now as there once were, we do have a very strong legacy and history and close connection to this place and to the land that is now Austin. So for this project, we're really just focusing in on Austin, but certainly there are a lot of connections in parallel, histories, trends, things like that from different communities across the state. And even when you take a step back, you can look at across the Americas, maroon communities in the Caribbean, Quilombo communities in Brazil. You see these kind of Black enclaves, these self-sustaining Black communities across the Americas. So there's a lot to unpack there. And to start that work, we're just focusing on Austin.
So, Rachel, given that you work for the University of Texas here in Austin, are there plans to house the detailed research and archives, that sort of provide the history of freedom colonies, not just in Austin, but across the state? Is there a plan to eventually house them in a place where people can access the oral histories, the stories, the detailed archives, just to do their research, or just for information? Is there a plan for that?
Yeah, we're doing that work now. So we spoke a moment ago about Shankleville, and I've worked very closely with Laretha Clay. There's a Shankleville Community Oral History Collection at the University of Texas that I work with pretty regularly. So there's a strong community here, as everyone in this room probably knows, a strong community amongst the libraries, archives, and cultural centers here in Austin. And we're all kind of in touch and working together to do this important preservation work. There really is urgency to it, right? These stories are going with the people who leave the city, with the people who pass. So it's a collective effort, and we're all doing our best to try to document. And I certainly think this documentary will help get us there, maybe a little bit faster.
And so would one just go to the University of Texas website to find this? How would we find it?
Sure, I'll drop my email in the chat. Okay. That's a great way to start. But UT, the Austin History Center, Houston Tillotson University, the Carver Museum, we're all in close communication and all kind of see each other as resources in this space. It's really about the stories and the preservation work, and less about what specific institution they go to. We just really want to make sure that they're preserved and that they're accessible for generations to come.
Thank you, appreciate it. We have a couple more comments in the chat box. Maria says, thank you to you both. She is a UT archaeologist. You probably know, is this Maria Franklin? I'm assuming maybe.
Yes, Maria Franklin.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Franklin, for being here.
Yeah, it's
appreciate
great to see something on freedom colonies. I was
absolutely
thrilled. Yeah,
absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. And Christina Wilson says thank you as well for the presentation. I just wanted to share that. Rachel, thank you so much for dropping your email in the chat box. For anyone who is interested in learning more about the work that's being done, please contact Rachel, or you can contact us and we can help connect you with Rachel and with Fumi.
Oh, sorry to cut you off. You can also reach out to us via Art is Cool.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
To start as well.
Thank you. Any final questions? We have a minute or so left in our hour. So if there's any final question, please jump in. Otherwise,
one mention. There has been probably about a year ago, the city of Austin did establish a Travis County African American Heritage Commission. So yes, there is that. It's kind of a grassroots effort, but several of these ladies are involved on some level with that. And some of the work that they have presented here is also akin to what is happening. And as Rachel said, there's a very strong network of African-American archivists, historians that are working together on putting that history together and Fumi and Rachel have presented it, in this documentary format, which is wonderful. But the Travis County African American Heritage Commission was established by the city of Austin probably almost a year ago. And so there is a group that is formulated in a official way that is working to learn more about the history and gather the history and get these oral histories and all of that together for this kind of work. So there's work being done, all around the city and all around the county and all around the state. These are statewide efforts. So that's what I wanted to contribute.
Thank you, Lisa, for sharing that. And that's an important step that has happened here in Austin. So thank you for sharing that with the group. Rebecca, thank you so much for dropping the link in the chat box for Dr. Franklin's research on the Antioch colony. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And then the Gregory School, there's folks from the Gregory School who say that we here at the African American Library at the Gregory School also preserve these same histories, but in Houston. And can't wait to see the project in its entirety and hope to be able to explore shared and overlapping histories. And that's the importance of the work that is done at different levels, is finally when it comes together, it kind of is deep and rich in the level of detail. So thank you for that. I think that's it, I think, and we are right at 7 o'clock. Fumi, Rachel, thank you so much for your time. It's late in the evening. We really, really appreciate you taking the time to join us and to share your stories and information. And we look forward to seeing the documentary and to seeing more of your research, Rachel, over the next months and years. Appreciate it. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
And again, do join us for the next event on the 22nd. It is all about Purple Hull Peas. And so we'll see you then. Some of you, hopefully all of you at that time. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.